Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Jeffrey Epstein Show. I'm your host, Bobbycapucci, and this is a morning update. Hey, what's going on, everybody, and welcome to the program. Thanks to everybody who participated last night in the live stream. Once again, it was an action-packed 2 hours. All sorts of conversations were had. All sorts of questions were asked. And, well, I managed to come up with a few answers anyway. But all kidding aside, it was a good time, and I definitely suggest that if you have not joined us for one of these live streams yet, that next weekend you jump on in. It is very informative. There's a lot of back and forth, and there is a lot of good information being passed around in the comment section. So if you have not joined us, I think next Sunday is the perfect time for you to jump in and get involved. All right, folks, so we're not going to spend too much time doing any sort of monologuing this morning or openings of the show or anything like that. Our article is a pretty big article, pretty long article, and we're going to begin our exploration of the Maxwell family today. And we're going to start, obviously, with the patriarch. We're going to start with Robert Maxwell today, and we're going to be hearing from the author John Preston, and the article we're going to be sharing is an excerpt from his book, From Fall, The Mysterious Life and Death of Robert Maxwell. So, obviously, Mr. Preston has done the legwork, done the deep dive, and has explored the history and past of Robert Maxwell. So that's going to be our starting point for our conversation about the the Maxwell family. Maxwell, Manson, get it? Pretty much the same thing, right? With these crazy sons of bitches. So we're going to begin our exploration of the Maxwell family and the deep dive that is going to follow it right here with this article from Town and Country magazine, courtesy of John Preston. So we've talked about Robert Maxwell at length, and we've discussed his various dealings, and I have definitely come to the point where I believe he was big time involved in getting Ghislaine and Jeffrey Epstein together. Now, you all know how I feel about that relationship. I don't believe there was any love there. I don't believe there was ever any love there. And I think certainly from Bob Maxwell's perspective, it was always a business deal. And you know, like in the old days when rich and powerful families would have children and their daughters, they would be used to cement alliances with other noble houses or other houses that they might be at war with. And it's no different for these kind of people these days, right? Robert Maxwell and the Maxwell clan looked at themselves as some sort of, royal family. And if he could pawn Ghislaine off to Jeffrey Epstein and increase his wealth or his reach or anything like that, then he wouldn't hesitate to do it. Ghislaine Maxwell to Robert Maxwell was just another piece on the chessboard. Oh, sure, he liked that piece a little bit more than the others, but at the end of the day, he certainly would have no problem sacrificing the queen to save the king. The Mysterious Life and Death of Robert Maxwell. Today, Ghislaine Maxwell's father, Robert, is remembered mostly for his death. But in his prime, he represented power, money, and shocking deceit. And British society ate it all up. So, again, when I talk about the United States, that's the face for the whole entire Western world. Because this is happening everywhere. England, the United States, France, Italy, it doesn't matter. These people run roughshod over all of the elected officials, use backroom chambers, backroom dealings, and they live their lives like they're above the law. And Robert Maxwell certainly was no different. Can scandal be hereditary? Ghislaine Maxwell's involvement with Jeffrey Epstein made her a household name, but her ongoing legal woes didn't mark the first time her family had endured the glare of the spotlight. And yeah, I think it can be hereditary, right? If you were raised at good old daddy's knee and you were taught all of the tricks of the trade and the family business and how to operate in the shadows and you learned from your pops, well, yeah, it could definitely be hereditary and passed down. How many times have you seen it in organized crime? You have a mafioso who has a son who ends up getting into the life, and all of that was because he spent so much time at the social club with dad or at the bar with dad, and this becomes his life. It's the only life they've ever known, so this is the life they choose. And it's no different for Maxwell, in my opinion. She knew that she wanted to be amongst the highest levers of power, and she knew how to get there. All she needed was the proper tools. And my friends, there is a tool for every job and a job for every tool. And the Maxwells optimized that at every turn. When Ghislaine's father, Robert Maxwell, died in 1991, the official cause of death was a heart attack. But not everyone was convinced. Rumors swirled that the larger-than-life newspaper baron, whose body had been found near the Canary Islands, he was presumed to have fallen off his yacht, had committed suicide in the face of financial ruin, or had been assassinated by some shadowy intelligence agency. And was it really any wonder? And you know what makes me think about things is this his body was found floating around near the Canary Islands? You mean to tell me that the sharks didn't get him? I know that there's a ton of sharks around the Canary Islands, and maybe Robert Maxwell was so putrid and so disgusting that the sharks didn't even want to eat him. They were like, you know what? This is obviously going to give us agita. We can't eat this shit. Let this dude float away, and that'll be the end of that. And the sharks moved on to better tasting prey. How the hell does this guy float around near his boat and not get eaten by a shark or some other some sort of aquatic animal? Throughout his life, Maxwell worked tirelessly to obscure the truth about himself. Sound familiar, folks? Sound familiar? This is exactly what Ghislaine Maxwell has done. She has worked tirelessly to obscure the truth. Tirelessly to make it seem like she is just another so-called member of polite society getting on to get on. And that is a tactic that these people love to use. They will hide in plain sight while being brazen about their activities, rubbing everybody's face in it. And for the most part, they don't have to worry, because all of their buddies and all of their friends that are running around at the highest levels of politics and power are there to smooth things out for them the second it gets wrinkled up. He changed his name, denied his religion, and played shell games with vast fortunes, all in effort to storm first the British aristocracy and later the international cabal of billionaires, businessmen, and power brokers. The plan worked. And there's no doubt Robert Maxwell, Bob Maxwell, had his fingers on the levers of power in many different places. There's a lot of talk about his contacts in Russia. There's obviously his contacts in Israel, America, the United Kingdom, France. You know, this was a very powerful man with a lot of reach. This is a guy who had it all, had all the power in the world, had all the money in the world, and it was never enough. His greed is what drove him. His greed is what continued to make him go. And in the end, I suspect, it was his greed that ended up killing him. In his lifetime, Maxwell became a global publishing tycoon, running such newspapers as London's Daily Mirror and the New York's Daily News, a member of Parliament and a bête noire for the likes of Rupert Murdoch and Margaret Thatcher. Again, the levels of power that these people have infiltrated at, folks, is the highest levels there is. And that's not hyperbole either. That's not trying to make the statement more impactful. Look at the names of the people that guys like Bob Maxwell was cavorting with. Margaret Thatcher, Rupert Murdoch. The list goes on. That's just a little taste. A guy like Robert Maxwell was wielding so much unchecked power for so long, and to think or to act like the English authorities had no idea what was going on is naive at best. How many of them, English politicians, were being enriched by Robert Maxwell, running their campaigns on his dime? I'm sure a lot of them. There were also rumors that he was a spy for Israel or Britain or both. And I don't even know if we can call it rumor at this point. And again, I don't know about spy either, though. I think that's a stretch. I believe he definitely was an asset, but a traditional spy in the sense of, somebody marking some chalk on a park bench and leaving a message for their handler. I don't believe that was the case, but I definitely believe he was an asset of the Israeli intelligence apparatus, the English intelligence apparatus, certainly the CIA, and maybe was even being run by the KGB, or was dog-walking the KGB for, to gain more money and try and gain a little bit more access to more powerful levers of power. Because we know that's what these people did. Look, they collected powerful friends like you or I collected trading cards when we were growing up. In the new biography, Fall, The Mysterious Life and Death of Robert Maxwell, Britain's most notorious media baron, author John Preston follows the story of Maxwell's life, from a destitute childhood in Czechoslovakia to the heights of fame and fortune. And now remember, this is going to be our intro into Robert Maxwell, and then obviously to the rest of the clan. But we're going to go into the beginning of his life and all of that as well. I have an episode that I'm working on, probably going to come out next Monday, where it's going to start at the beginning of Robert Maxwell's life and work through from there to try and build even more of an idea of who he was and what his involvement was with people like Jeffrey Epstein. Preston deftly depicts how the trappings of money and power can be used to obscure a lifetime of secrets and lies. In this excerpt, Maxwell's uncanny ability to deflect attention with abundance is on full display, and serves as a chilling reminder that the apple never falls far from the tree. And again, I've said it from the very beginning that I think that Ghislaine spent plenty of time at Robert Maxwell's knee, and of all of the Maxwell children, was the most like dear old dad. She had the same chemical buildup, she had the same exact ideas, and she also had the same outlook on life after spending so much time with her dad and being so heavily influenced by her dad and the way Robert Maxwell conducted himself on a day-to-day basis. The dinner dances hosted by Robert and Betty Maxwell at Headington Hill Hall were considered, even by hardened partygoers, to be in a class of their own. The house itself was an ideal venue for a party. It had been built in the early 19th century by a culture-loving family of brewers, the Morels. They, too, had been keen party givers. In 1878, Oscar Wilde was among the 300 guests at one of their fancy dress balls. for reasons that are not entirely clear, he chose to come dressed as Prince Rupert of the Rhine. So this house has a history, obviously, of a place where the so-called elite of England come for parties, and it's not a new place when it comes to these people gathering and having whatever kind of weirdo billionaire howl at the moon covered in blood type of parties that these sick people have. And it shows you the kind of power that Robert Maxwell had. He had to have this kind of house, right? A house that had some history. A house where, there was people before him who were established in society. It's a good dinner piece conversation. Yeah, Oscar Wilde used to hang out at my house. You know how rich people have to floss about everything? Ever since the Maxwells moved into Headington Hill Hall, they continued the tradition of throwing grand parties. I love it. Headington Hill Hall. All of these names are, like a name from Game of Thrones, right? Summerhill Hall. And it cracks me up when I read about these different locations and you reflect back on different fantasy books that have come out and the influence that England and London has had on the whole fantasy genre is just incomparable. All right, well, I digress. But as guests soon discovered, Maxwell had his own way of doing things. The writer and future Conservative MP Giles Brandreth was a guest at one of their parties in the 1970s. At first, nothing struck him as out of the ordinary. It was only when I went up to Maxwell that I realized he had this apparatus on. There was an old-fashioned microphone attached to the lapel of his jacket with a windshield on it. And on his belt was this large box, the size of a hardback book with a dial in the middle. This was somehow connected to the speakers in each of the rooms. All right, so that explanation, for some reason in my mind, I had the visions of Data from Goonies and all of his little contraptions that he wore, right? The little belt contraption, he had a contraption for this, for that. Who does Robert Maxwell think he is? Data from Goonies? A broken down wannabe Bruce Wayne? I mean, really, with the apparatuses all over the belt, the windshield? What? What are you even wearing, you jackwagon? Maxwell, Brandreth realized, was wearing his own personal PA system, enabling him to address people no matter how far away they were. Talk about being an arrogant tool. You're walking around with a PA system on you, looking like Billy Blanks teaching a Tai Bo class. Get a grip, Daddy Serpent. He turned the dial down when he was talking to you. Then, as soon as he saw someone he wanted to talk to on the other side of the room, he turned it up again. And this disembodied voice would be booming out of the speakers. I can only imagine this idiot trying to get your attention from across the room with this stupid contraption he's wearing, looking like the world's biggest moron. For all the splendor of his parties, Maxwell himself remained an oddly elusive figure. It was as if there was kind of invisible moat around him, Brandreth recalls. He was definitely a presence, but whenever he came into a room, instead of the room being more crowded, it always seemed slightly emptier than before. Well, that's what happens when a bipedal serpent walks in and sucks the air out of a room, right? Daddy Serpent comes strolling in on National Serpent's Day, by the way. That is what today is. And sucks all of the air out of the room. I'm sure that Robert Maxwell was an absolute dickhead, okay? Let's just be honest, all right? I'm sure he's one of those rich dickheads that makes you want to vomit in your own mouth. It is disgusting, the narcissism that we see on display with these people. As Maxwell's fortune grew, the larger and grander the parties became. Cabinet ministers would rub shoulders with captains of industry, leading scientists with newspaper editors. Boy, does that sound familiar? Almost like the blueprint was taken directly from Robert Maxwell, hand it off to dear old little daughter, Minnie Serpent, and then put into action with the help of Jeffrey Epstein. It is the same exact playbook that was used. Get close to all of these people of industry, scientists, newspaper editors, and then go to work. Shape the narrative. Build yourself a shield that encompasses all of these dumb idiots in so-called polite society, in the so-called realm of the elite, that gives you the cover to continue your disgusting human trafficking. And that is exactly the blueprint used by Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, just like it was used by dear old dad. But the joint party to celebrate Maxwell's 65th birthday and the 40th anniversary of his company, Pergamon Press, in June 1988, was confidently predicted to outdo them all in terms of both opulence and pomp. Now, we know that these MFers like to spend a couple of bucks on their parties, right? And it all makes sense, right? When you start looking at it, of course they were willing to spend all these monies on parties and on opulence and on all other sorts of nonsense because it wasn't their money. They were laundering it. They were stealing it. It was a Ponzi scheme. But meanwhile, even after Maxwell's fall, even after Maxwell was caught in the act, basically, somehow his children, his ex-wife, all of the Maxwell clan still have a ton of money. Now, when normal people get caught up doing something like this, all of your money is seized by the government. But when you're rich, well, you find a way around that. Unfortunately, the crack dealer in South Central LA isn't afforded the same luxuries under our two-tiered system. No one, not even as many critics, could deny that Maxwell was on a roll. From Oxford to Osaka, his empire was booming. As he had boasted just a few weeks earlier, the banks owe us money, we have so much on deposit. Oh, is that so, huh? So much money on deposit. You mean money that you were laundering, money that you were stealing, money that you were taking from other people? And how much of that money and how much of that scam was helped along the way by somebody like Jeffrey Epstein? We know that Epstein was involved in this sort of thing, moving money around, hiding money, making money untaxable and untraceable. At the same time, academic institutions were queuing up to bestow honors upon him. Maxwell had just been given a doctorate of law by Aberdeen University, as well as an honorary life membership in the University of London's Institute of Philosophy. Now, you see how academia is always involved with the scummiest amongst us, it would seem? And yet these are the people who think that it's a good idea for us to send our children to them, to safeguard them, to teach them, to show them the right way in life. Academia should be ashamed of themselves, and there should be a much more forceful voice coming from every corner of academia. Unfortunately, there's only a handful of strong, courageous people in that world that have stood up, and Dr. Stephen DeLay most certainly is one of them. But we need more people in that world to stand up, and they need to understand and admit how deep the problems run on their end. So many guests had been invited, around 3,000, that it had been decided to hold the party over 3 consecutive nights. Friday night would be white tie and decorations, and Saturday night black tie, while the Sunday night party would be a more informal affair for members of staff. In between, there was a lunch party on Saturday. Oh, if you're staff, you can't come to Friday or Saturday. No. That's for our real guests. That's like in the Italian household. If you try and go and get yourself a little bit of the Entenmann's, your mom will slap you in the hand with a wooden spoon and tell you, that's for company. So basically, he would have a little function on Sunday at the tail end of it for his staff and for people that weren't worthy of running the halls with the rest of the serpents. Bob Maxwell and the rest of these people are some of the most disgusting human beings, and I use that word loosely, that I have ever had I don't even know what to say about it, honestly. I've never really researched people like this. Literally, the whole entire family is scummy, one scummier than the next. In the days leading up to the first party, vast marquees were erected around the house. 2 floor-to-ceiling windows were removed to improve access to the main marquee. Legions of florists came down from London to create elaborate displays in the house. The marquees, and even the swimming pool, this involved them transporting the flowers out to the middle of the pool in little dinghies. Imagine having a pool so damn big you needed a dinghy to get out to the middle of it. I mean, my parents have a junior Olympic-sized swimming pool in their backyard, and that's the pool I grew up swimming in, and it's big as hell. I can't even imagine needing a dinghy to get out to the middle of my pool. A stage had been built at one end of the main marquee, and a dance floor laid so the guests could dance on the sound of the Joe Loss Orchestra. Later on, it would be a disco. At the end of the meal, the cast of the West End musical, Me and My Girl, would perform highlights from the show. So they had the whole thing going on here, right? They had the orchestra, they had a dance floor, they had it turned into a disco, they had people that were involved in plays, doing little skits from those plays. So as you can see, it was your typical debased, Roman-esque, debaucherous evening. To ensure that everyone enjoyed unimpeded views of the entertainment, the dining area had been constructed on 2 levels. A mobile darkroom had also been set up on the grounds. Guests who had their pictures taken during the evening by a team of 6 photographers would be able to collect them as they left. Woo-wee! I would love to find out who those photographers were and what sort of pictures they still have up the cuff. I bet you that there are a ton of pictures from this event that are floating around, and these 6 photographers, those would be some interesting-ass conversations. To mark the 40th anniversary of Pergamon, a special book of tributes had been compiled. Pergamon had grown into the world's largest scientific publisher, and the editors of Maxwell's scientific journals, more than 300 in all, along with various Nobel laureates, extolled his virtues in extravagant terms. Again, you see the hooks that Bob Maxwell had into the world of science and academia, and that was passed down to Ghislaine, the blueprint, and to Jeffrey Epstein. Obviously, I don't have direct evidence of that, but folks, I am convinced that that is how all of this came to be. If we just take a look at Bob Maxwell and his blueprint, and we bring that blueprint over and put it on Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell's blueprint, it matches up almost to a T. The editor of the International Journal of Hydrogen Energy noted, "Everything Bob Maxwell touches turns to gold." You mean fool's gold, right? While the director of one of his Japanese companies wrote, "Each time I have the pleasure of meeting him, I am reminded of F. Scott Fitzgerald's words that a millionaire is no ordinary man." Yes, he is. And F. Scott Fitzgerald was completely wrong. They bleed the same. They put their pants on the same as us. And guess what? They're no better than you because they have a couple of bucks. Most of them had, the fortunate luck of being born into it. And those that made their own millions, well, hey, good for you, right? Again, I don't have any problem with people being wealthy. I think it's a great thing. I think we should all want to have a good amount of wealth, because if we all had wealth, then we could do good things with it, help other people. When you see something that's wrong, you could jump in and fix it. But it seems like everybody who has this kind of wealth is nothing but a scumbag. Last night during the live stream, I had a listener ask me if I could name one billionaire that I thought was a good person. And folks, I honestly cannot. Now, I know that I'm probably the wrong person to ask considering how cynical I am when it comes to these people, but I really truly believe that there's not one person that comes to mind that I can think of. Now, I'm sure I'm missing somebody. I'm sure there's probably a billionaire or two out there that have done good things. But when you start breaking it down and you look at all of these hedge fund managers and all of these people who are in the financial sector, it seems like all of them have been fined or slapped with some sort of penalty for stealing and cheating. All of them. So how can I think and sit here and even begin to try and lie to you folks or gaslight you by saying, oh yeah, well, this millionaire is a good guy? Because honestly, I truly don't think that there are any at this point. Arthur Barrett, editor of Vacuum, recalled how his initial doubts about Maxwell had soon disappeared. I have to confess that, quickly realizing his predatory and entrepreneurial ambitions, I nonetheless took a great liking to him. And there's no doubt he was a human predator, right? Definitely a predator, the kind of person that preyed on the less fortunate, the weak, companies that were in peril. You know, basically the same guy that's taking it in the shorts right now on Wall Street with the short of GameStop. The same kind of scumbag. Among the congratulatory telegrams was one from the U.S. President Ronald Reagan. As the happy birthdays ring out, Nancy and I are delighted to join in the chorus of appreciation. Isn't that nice, Ronnie Reagan? Send your buddy there, Bobby Maxwell, a nice happy birthday card, the leader of the free world, sending a nice happy birthday card to a scumbag like Bob Maxwell. You see, folks, Donald Trump wasn't the cause of the problems. Donald Trump is a symptom of the problems. And I know it feels good and visceral to lash out and blame him. But we have to dig deeper. We can't just dig a little bit under the surface and be like, all right, that's it, we're where we need to be. This goes back a very long time, folks, and the politicians that we elect and the people that have ruled over us for a very long time have straight up been evil, I'm sorry to say. The Prime Minister, Margaret Thatcher, offered a somewhat solipsistic contribution of her own. Robert Maxwell has never made any secret of the fact that officially he is politically opposed to me. But to tell the truth, I think he rather liked my approach to politics and government, a sense of direction and decision. These are the very qualities that have taken him far. Oh, well, that's nice by the Iron Lady, huh? You know, Robert Maxwell, he doesn't like me very much, but I think that he likes my approach to politics and government. Probably not the stamp of approval that you're looking for there, Iron Lady. These are the very qualities that have taken him far. As far as the labor leader, Neil Kinnock, was concerned, if Bob Maxwell didn't exist, no one could invent him. Yeah, he is one of those characters, right? One of those characters that you think you'd only see in a book. But he was a real-life arch-villain, folks. That's what Bob Maxwell was. A real-life bad guy. On the night of the first party, guests passed down a receiving line where they were greeted by Maxwell, Betty, and all 7 of their children. Oh, kind of like when Robert Baratheon comes to Winterfell, huh? And the Starks are all lined up to meet him and greet him. These people truly thought that that's who they were. They thought that they were the modern-day nobles. They were royal houses. We were living in a feudal world, and we were all still their serfs. And when they raised the banners, we have to come running. That's how these people truly lived. Some of the guests arrived bearing birthday presents. The broadcaster, David Frost, turned up with a 500-pound bottle of wine. Unaware of how much it had cost, Maxwell's chef later tipped it into a beef stew. Imagine that. $500 bottle of wine used in this stew. That's the sort of money we're dealing with. That's the kind of people we're dealing with. A $500 pound bottle of wine pays a lot of people's car payment and insurance, half of their rent, food for a month. But these people are like, oh, we'll just pour this in the wine. Pour this in the beef stew here. They are so disconnected from reality, folks, that when their crash inevitably comes, forget Humpty Dumpty, because these pieces can never be put back together again for the so-called elite. The toothpaste is out of the tube. As guests sip their drinks, the band of the Coldstream Guards march back and forth across the lawn. Before dinner started, Robert and Betty made their formal entrance into the marquee to an announcement from the Master of Ceremonies. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please welcome your host and hostess, Robert and Elizabeth Maxwell, and a fanfare of herald trumpeters. Like I said, they truly believe that they're the modern-day aristocracy, the ruling houses, and that we should all be out working their farms as their serfs. And when it's time to go fight in one of their endless, unneeded wars, well, make sure you grab your hoe. Make sure you grab your pickaxe, because you're going to be on the front line, and you're going to be cannon fodder, while the rest of us eat our caviar and sip our bubbly. Like Bad Religion says, we'll just let them eat war. Everyone stood to applaud. Along with a row of medals pinned to his black tailcoat, Maxwell was wearing a large white enamel cross on a chain around his neck. Oh yeah, because I'm sure Robert Maxwell was Captain Religious Pants. What they do is they wear these religious symbols from Christian religions or otherwise, and they do it as mockery. These people aren't religious. These people are out, howling at the moon to Moloch and shit. That's what it certainly seems like. So whenever you see them wearing some sort of religious apparel like a cross or anything like that, it's in mockery, in my opinion. This was the Order of the White Rose of Finland, a decoration normally given to foreign heads of state in recognition of outstanding civilian or military conduct. Betty Maxwell wore a dress made of gold embroidered tulle over yellow taffeta silk. Boy, must be nice. Must be nice, huh? A gold embroider and yellow taffeta silk. These people are living in a completely different world than the rest of us, folks. And for a long time, they were allowed to exist there, up in their so-called rarefied air, without none of us really paying attention. That shit is over. We are fully engaged now, and you so-called elites, you have our full, unadulterated attention. At one of their earlier parties in 1986, the speech had been given by a former Prime Minister, Harold Wilson. Suffering from the early stages of Alzheimer's, Wilson had begun his speech brightly enough, but then clearly forgot who he was supposed to be talking about. This time, nothing had been left to chance. The main speech was given by Maxwell's banker, Sir Michael Richardson, managing director of Rothschild's Bank and an economic advisor to Miss Thatcher. Boy, those Rothschilds are just quality people as well, huh? They don't have their hands in all kinds of scumbaggery. They haven't had their hands in all kinds of scumbaggery since, Waterloo. Do you think it's just a coincidence, folks, that the same names happen to pop up in these articles as we go through this? Do you really think that's just a coincidence? Betty and Bob, this must be the party of the decade, Richardson declared to shouts of hear, hear, and another round of applause. All of us are delighted to be here, because we believe you have made a major contribution to all of our lives. But as she sat beaming away by Maxwell's side, Betty found herself wondering if the party might not be too puffed up with self-importance, if something vital might not have been lost along the way. Oh, it's all about the face, right? We got to have the best party. Everything is about consolidation of power. It comes back to that no matter what. And you see it in real time with these articles as we read them. It is so apparent that these people are operating in forget a different world, a whole different universe than the rest of us. In particular, she had major doubts about the Herald Trumpeters. I thought it was really over the top, but I managed to play my part. For all its success, for me, it had lost the intimate quality that our previous parties had had. It was just too vast. Oh, please. I'm sure that, your husband felt the same. The party had to be vast. The more vast it was, the more glitzy, the more glamorous, the easier it was for Maxwell to sink his hooks into people. The easier it was for Maxwell to use the so-called rich and elite to make his own reputation stellar and to give him access to these higher levels of power the same way his daughter used the same blueprint to ape his behavior all of these years later. That evening, the economist Peter Jay found himself sharing Betty Maxwell's misgivings. It was as if people came because they wanted to see Maxwell. It was a spectacle, and although they sucked up to him and enjoyed his hospitality, you could see them raising their eyebrows at the same time. Oh yeah, I'm sure that they had such a big problem with it that they ate all of his food and enjoyed all of his music and hung out with all of the other scuzzbags. I love these people who are like, oh, our eyebrows were raised as you stayed and continued to party and suck down champagne on his dime. Like that makes you a better person. Just like the jackasses at the Reddit, with the Reddit CEO, when Maxwell was at the party with all of them, and she comes out and says, oh, we all knew what Maxwell was. Then why are you still at the party with her? Why didn't you leave right away? And it comes down to, at the end of the day, these people don't give a damn. After dinner was over and the cast of Me and My Girl had finished performing, guests were asked to go back outside. There they were, treated to a fireworks display, the culmination of which was a huge flaming sign spelling out the words, "Happy Birthday, Bob!" across the Oxford skyline. Must be nice. Big fireworks display, forcing everyone to come out and watch it in your honor. Nah, no narcissism here, folks. But not all of the guests stayed to watch. Some of them succumbed to curiosity and went snooping. Mike Malloy, by now the editor-in-chief of the Mirror, was particularly struck by the decor of Headington Hill Hall. All the furniture looked as if it had been bought from the sale of a second-rate country house in the 1920s. And the paintings were absolutely terrible. I've never seen a worse collection. I bet you those paintings were all fake. He probably had his art collection stashed somewhere to, hide it. Make sure that he wasn't getting taxed on it and shit. And the furniture, well, that doesn't shock me. It seems to me that a lot of these people have terrible taste when it comes to the interior decorations of their houses. I mean, look at how bad Jeffrey Epstein's houses were decorated. Having inspected the art, Malloy peered into Maxwell's drawing room. There were all these bookshelves with books on them, except when I looked more closely, I saw they weren't real books. They were made out of cardboard. I couldn't get over it. Here was this man who had this fortune out of publishing, and yet there weren't even real books on his shelves. In fact, not all the books were false. Only those concealing Maxwell's stereo system. And, it's just an overall look at Maxwell in general. His whole life was false. Everything about him was false. The way he presented himself was false. And even the books that he had on display were fake. While the dancing was going on, Maxwell asked another of the guests, Gerald Ronson, CEO of the property developers Heron International, if he would like to come into the house for a quiet drink. He waved his fat finger at me and said, "Let's go into the library, because I don't want to talk to these people." They were, Maxwell told him, a bunch of arseholes who would go anywhere if they were invited by someone important. Well, I can't disagree with Maxwell there. He's right about that. These people are a bunch of arseholes, and they would go anywhere if they were invited by somebody with power and money, and it doesn't matter how scummy that person might be. Maxwell had something he wanted to show him. Bob said, "You always thought I was joking when I told you I had won the Military Cross." He then opened up a large photo album and proudly pointed to one of the photographs. Taken more than 40 years earlier, it showed Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery pinning the medal onto the uniform of a much younger, slimmer Maxwell. Ronson laughed and held up his hands. "I said I'd take it all back, Bob. I'm sorry if I didn't believe you, but you do tell so many stories." Well, folks, that is the opening salvo into our exploration of the Maxwell family, starting with Robert Maxwell. Now, this is just one instance, a bit of an overview, and it gives to show you a little bit of the opulence and the way that he lived his life. But as we begin to dig deeper and go further down this rabbit hole, you will see that his life was mainly based on stealing, consolidating power, and being a general all-around scuzzbag, just like Daddy's little girl. If you'd like to contact me, you can do that at Bobbycapucci at protonmail.com. That's BOBBYCAPUCCI at protonmail.com. You can also find me on Twitter at BOBBY_CAPUCCI. All of the links that go with this episode can be found in the description box. All right, folks, I'll be back later on tonight with the Daily Drop, and we will pick up where we left off.